Are Mexicans really stealing jobs from Americans?
Let's go again.
Are
No, not you.
Are Mexicans really stealing jobs from Americans?
There's been a lot of panic among American workers that their job opportunities are being taken by so-called illegal immigrants, especially ones who will work for way less money. Now, we all know that not all undocumented immigrants are Mexicans, and obviously not all Mexicans are undocumented. But this came to a head during the 2016 election when now President Donald Trump campaigned on the platform of cutting back illegal immigration by building a border wall between the US and Mexico and creating stricter deportation policies. But the way Trump talks about immigrants sounds like a horror movie. They're taking our jobs. They're taking our money. They're killing us. Which to that last one, no. But as for taking our jobs, well, that anti-immigrant stance is almost as old as the United States itself. But it's worth taking seriously because finding work can be very difficult. Before we get into it, as we've talked about before, there are many complicated reasons why people are unable to immigrate legally. So instead, we'll refer to those immigrants as undocumented instead of demonizing them as illegal. But let's ask the question, for every undocumented immigrant that gets a job, is a job taken away from an American citizen? To help me explain, I've brought along my friend, Maritza Montañez.
Thanks, Francesca. Undocumented immigrants make up about 5% of the workforce in America. And the kinds of jobs that many undocumented immigrants have are, frankly, the physically exhausting kinds of jobs in extreme temperatures that most Americans would rather not do, including me. Undocumented immigrants are mainly employed in manual labor and service jobs, like working on a farm or as maids and janitors. And even Americans who might gravitate toward this type of work are more likely to get jobs that require English language and technical skills, like working as a cashier or truck driver.
But the reasoning behind this idea that immigrants are taking away jobs from Americans is so common that economists gave it a name. It's called the lump of labor fallacy, which is the false notion that there is only so much work to be done and that no one can get a job without taking one from someone else. The problem is that this idea doesn't account for the fact that when immigrants arrive, they don't just increase the number of workers, they also increase demand for lots of other local goods and services. They use the money they earn to rent apartments, eat food, get haircuts, and buy cell phones, which means there's more jobs building apartments, giving haircuts, and selling cell phones. So when more people join the job market, there's a greater need for goods and services. But maybe right now you're thinking, okay, but what if I really want to work at a farm?
Well, glad you asked, because lots of them are hiring. So, you'll work long hours, get no health insurance, live far away from any friends and family, and make the least amount I can pay you. Can you start Monday? See, 9 out of 10 agriculture workers in California are foreign-born, and more than half are undocumented immigrants. But cracking down on illegal immigration has actually hurt the American farming industry. This past summer, farmers in California struggled to hire enough workers to harvest their crops, which resulted in millions of dollars of lost profit and higher vegetable prices. Because America needed another excuse not to eat vegetables.
But maybe if farms could raise their wages to something more livable, Americans would be lining up in droves to work on them, right? Well, again, that makes a lot of logical sense, but many farmers argue it'd just be cheaper and more efficient to turn to robots. And overall, it won't be long before most farm workers and, well, many manual workers in general are replaced by machines. It's projected that 83% of jobs in which people make less than $20 an hour are now or will eventually be automated, which is something we really should all worry about because it could fundamentally change the economy.
Today on Decoded, can you be a robot without appropriating human culture?
But what about jobs going to Mexico? Are those Mexicans taking our jobs, Maritza?
Well, kinda, but it's less like these guys taking your job and more like these guys giving them your job. Moving factories to Mexico became easier because of something called the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Basically, NAFTA lets the US, Mexico, and Canada trade stuff with one another without paying taxes on it, which, in theory, was intended to help all of our economies, reduce prices, and make more jobs. But a lot of companies moved their decent-paying American jobs to Mexican factories because labor is cheaper there, workers often receive little to no benefits, and government oversight is weaker. And for the people who worked in those American factories, it's tough because manufacturing jobs were often a pathway to the middle class. Trump campaigned against NAFTA as part of his promise to bring back jobs, which you can agree or disagree with. The problem was that instead of just being critical of the politicians who put these agreements in place, or the men and women in corporate boardrooms who, actually moved the factories out of the US, he used his position to stir up racism and xenophobia towards Mexican people themselves.
But being mad at the Mexican people who take those jobs is kind of weird. For the people in Mexico, taking a job in a factory run by an American car company is no different than an American taking a job at a factory run by a Japanese or German car company. And we can't point our fingers at just NAFTA or Mexico for the loss of manufacturing jobs in America over the years. American manufacturing jobs have moved all over the globe. Since the 1950s, American factories have been closing for a number of reasons, including globalization, currency valuations, economic recession, and automation.
Forgetting the robots will be your doom. Ha ha ha.
It's a complicated issue. We could talk all day about the many economic policies and laws that affect American jobs, but stirring up fear and resentment towards Mexicans and immigrants in general will never be the solution. Special thanks to Maritza for helping out today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on Decoded.